How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Sector 6, and today we've got some shiny new Final Fantasy XVI interviews to talk about. Yes, we have. So, over the last 24-48 hours, we've seen a lot of interviews drop from Naoki Yoshida and the team over at CBU3. And yeah, the team working on Final Fantasy XVI. There's an interview with Famitsu. There's another interview with someone else, can't remember who it is. I've got the interview with 4Gamer for this video. We're not going to do the whole thing because the whole interview is pretty big. It's a pretty big interview. I'll make sure the link is in the description below so that you can go and check it out yourself if you want to after you've watched the video. It is a pretty big interview. There's a lot of stuff in there. I'm going to focus predominantly on the story aspects that we get in this trailer. There's a lot of stuff talking about the development. There's a lot of stuff talking about the combat. And I will briefly touch on the interesting points of the combat and things like that. But predominantly, I'm going to be focusing on the hints that we get about the narrative and like confirmation of certain things, and yeah, just anything that they say about the story, that's what we're going to be looking at. Make sure you smash a like on the video and tell YouTube it's good. Also, hit that subscribe button. We're still climbing. So, you know, get us to that next target. But enough of that. Let's get on with the video. Let's dive into this interview. It may end up being a long video, this. We'll see. Now, first off, I've got some images off Twitter from the amazing Turquoise Hammer, who has translated the 4Gamer interview for the most part. They've translated all of the story segment that I'm interested in at the minute. I know that they're still working through the translation as well, so, you know, head over to their Twitter account, give them some love, give them some support. And yeah, massive thank you to Turquoise Hammer for doing this, because it's just made it slightly easier for me to do this video. So, yeah, good times. So we're going to be using Turquoise Hammer's translations. And the first few kind of images that we get, like I was saying earlier, they tend to focus on the development of the game, how the team came together, that sort of thing. Not particularly what we're interested in at the moment. It is pretty interesting stuff, you know, I'll be honest, it is interesting stuff, but it's not necessarily what we're looking for. What we're looking for kicks in not too long after that, when the interviewer comments that we get a glimpse of the world and its lore in the most recent trailer. And Yoshida chats about the game and the conception process, and then the interviewer starts to ask about the mother crystals, which we've been told is like the focal point of each region, and what benefits the mother crystals give to the area that they are found in. And Maya Hero goes on to talk about the atmosphere of Valistea and the fact that there's ether suffused with the atmosphere and with the air. So in Valistea, magic can be used by gathering and expending the ether, and the mother crystals are what supply the ether. So we kind of had an idea that's where it was going, but it seems like it's much more ingrained in day-to-day society in a lot of places. He continues that all people carry around smaller crystals carved from a mother crystal as a conduit so that they can use magic that rouse the elements, etc, etc. So yeah, they're using a chunk of the mother crystal that they carry around as like a focus for the magic, and to take the ether out of the air and use it. Which is interesting. I didn't see that coming, if I'm going to be honest with you. It's quite an interesting little point. So we're going to see a lot of people in the world using magic kind of enabled by these crystals, it would seem. And they're kind of comparing the mother crystals in the ether as like a resource, and essentially what we've got going on here is a resource war. That seems to be what's starting to happen. And Maya Hero goes on to say that the mother crystals are a source of energy, so the more that you control, the better. So yeah, it's definitely looking like we're going to get some sort of resource war going on. But I think then on top of that, we're going to have an Eikon war going on at the same time, which is something that they touch on a little bit later. But yeah, the more ether you have, the more magic you can use, and the more your nation's power grows. But remember, mother crystals aren't something that humans can create, so you're going to have people vying for them. We then get a bit of a conversation about the blight, which is a region where the ethers run dry. When ether runs out, vegetation can't grow in that area, nor can animals survive. So that crystal tower sort of thing that we saw in the trailer, that looks like it's a mother crystal that has run out of ether. That's what it's kind of putting us in mind of. The question is, whose crystal is it? We know that Rosaria kind of siphons their crystal, their ether, from the Iron Kingdom, and we know that there's a fallen northern territories as well. So could that crystal that we've seen in the trailer be one of those two regions? So either Rosaria's defunct crystal, or in the same way the crystal that was part of the Northern Realms, which is where Jill Warriors come from. Or is it something else? Who knows? It could be a region that we've not heard of yet that's kind of fell by the wayside. it's good to get these kind of confirmations and these little bits of information, though. I like this, and trust me, we get a lot more. Let's keep moving. So the interviewer asks, I'm assuming magic can't be used there either. The idea is that with the blight encroaching further and further across Valistea, each nation is trying to secure every last mother crystal so that it can preserve its territory. If you don't know when your own nation's mother crystal is going to be exhausted, it might be a good idea to take one from another country. And Yoshida goes on, with the blight and its ether depletion encroaching toward the center from various points along the continents, each nation wants to expand its territory while it still has the power to. However, doing so won't solve the underlying problem. Exactly. This, the ether's still going to drain away. And to be fair, if people are going to war and fighting with each other all the time, they're going to be using a lot more magic. If anything, they're going to speed the process up. They're going to expedite the draining of the ether and the mother crystals in general, and therefore lead to more blight. So, interesting. Now, Yoshida goes on that ultimately the story progresses against the backdrop of this conundrum about what should be done if and when all these nations are corroded by the blight eventually. So yeah, you've got this you've got your main narrative going on and Clive's struggle and everything like that, but you've then got this depletion of ether that seems to be going on, and if not accelerating with the situation in Valistea. Then we get a little bit of information about the 5 nations. So the interviewer's like, can you give us some details about the 5 nations? So going in the order that they appear in the trailer, first you have the Grand Duchy of Rosaria, a nation with a very long and rich history and the birthplace of Clive. Its icon is Phoenix, and it has a very staunch national character. So not a massive amount of new information there. Moving on, we got the Holy Empire of Sanbreque, a religious state that believes each and every deed is the will of the one true deity. Who is that one true deity? That's going to be something that we need to figure out. Could this be to do with the mural? Could this be that amalgamation of Ifrit, Phoenix, and something else at the bottom? Or could it be that, like in a previous video that I've done, go check it out, it's good, where I'm discussing the mural and what's going on, in the mural, what kind of information can we take from it? I did briefly speculate there could be what looks to be a faded face at the very top of the mural. Could that maybe be the deity that we're talking about here? Also, if the Holy Emperor, who governs the country, should decree that God has said something should be done, whatever he says will be carried out in full. So, standard empire things. Next up, we've got the Dalmekian Republic. It's the only nation that doesn't have a king or an emperor or something to that effect, and its territory consists of deserts and desolate terrain. Being a republic, it comprises numerous provinces, all with their own delegates who gather for government affairs. Hugo, the nation's dominant, is outwardly an advisor to Parliament, but he wields tremendous authority through his ability to turn into an icon. Again, nothing new there. And then we move on to the Iron Kingdom. Now, they are a religious state, but rather than worshipping a god, they worship the crystals themselves, so the mother crystals. So the mother crystals themselves in the Iron Kingdom, they are regarded as the deity. Now, my hero continues, in Valistea, magic is widespread and used in all manner of tasks. Like I was saying, it seems like it's going to be heavily ingrained into day-to-day life from what they're saying in this interview. But the Iron Kingdom alone does not follow those kind of practices, which makes sense. If they view the crystal itself as a deity, they're not going to go chiseling bits of their deity off to boil a kettle. Yeah, that tracks. Magic is held as an act that squanders the aether provided by the deity, and with the practice banned, the nation's inhabitants lead rather primitive lives. They're also the only country that uses a language other than the common tongue, and this is why I think Ifrit's going to be a big thing to do with the Iron Kingdom. I genuinely feel that this Dark Ifrit is connected to the Iron Kingdom directly. That's just the vibe I've got at the minute. That's why they kill dominance, that's why they don't use the magic from the crystal, because they know that it's tainted with Ifrit, potentially. Something to that effect, you know what I mean? They don't want to use the power, or maybe they don't want to use the power so that Ifrit, when it returns, can be strong. I don't know. It could go either way, to be honest with you, that one. But yeah, then finally we get to the kingdom of Waleed, however they're saying it. Their dominant is their king, and as you'd expect from someone who's united dozens of clans through conquest, he is a warlike individual. And then Yoshida chips in with the fact that there's one more place, and that's the Crystalline Dominion, which is locked right in the centre of Valistea. It's home to a massive mother crystal and has long declared itself a neutral territory. The Dominion is surrounded by all of the other different nations, so in this place only you have everyone sharing the energy instead of one particular nation claiming control. There's no king, and the people living there aren't the subjects of anyone. You can think of it as a non-interference zone, smack in the middle of everything. So a lot of information that we already knew, a few tasty little tidbits here and there. Learning about this one true deity that the Holy Empire of Sanbreque are all about, that's quite interesting. Learning about the fact that the Iron Kingdom worship the crystals themselves as the deity, that's also quite interesting. Definitely things to look into. Now, Yoshida goes into more detail about magic here, and he says that the dominant of each nation harbours an icon within their body, which means they can use magic without the need for a crystal conduit. Likewise, there are individuals known as the bearers, who can cast magic using the surrounding ether without having to channel it through crystals. These bearers fall somewhere between humans and dominants, but are more or less persecuted throughout the realm. He continues to say that humans' use of magic was considered an aberration to those who once held sway, much as it still is in the Iron Kingdom, for instance, which is again another thing that hints to me that the Iron Kingdom are kind of like the one final bastion of like the old ways or something to that effect. Like the Iron Kingdom remembers what went down 1500 years ago. Every other nation seems to have gradually forgotten over time and just started using the crystals to their own ends, you know, on their whims. Whereas the Iron Kingdom's like, no. Yeah, the Iron Kingdom are interesting to me. The Iron Kingdom are real interesting to me at the minute. He then talks about the ways that these people are treated. So he says that it depends on the country, but they're often exploited as a source of manual labour. Talking about the bearers, I believe here. The Grand Duchy of Rosaria is comparatively lenient, though not to the extent that they can live as free citizens. And there's no information about them in the trailer. The backstory art for them is apparently quite complicated, so we'll be going over the details at a later time, Yoshida says. For now, just keep it in the back of your mind that these beings exist. Oh, believe me, mate, we will keep this information in the back of our minds. Trust me. Trust me. Now, the interviewer asks, speaking of treatment varying from nation to nation, I'd like to know where the dominants and the icons stand. And we kind of get details that we sort of already know. In Rosaria, Phoenix saved the country and saw it rise from the ashes, so the dominants have served as the country's rulers for generations. I assume again, that goes back to 1500 years ago. We've got the Dalmekian Republic's dominant is treated hospitably in his capacity as advisor. However, at the end of the day, it's the people of the Republic who rule the country. He just has a degree of power because he's a titan, basically. And then you've got the Kingdom of Waloed, where the dominant is the king. So those three are treated quite well. But then in the Iron Kingdom, icons are not to be tolerated because they pose the greatest opposition to the deity who grants ether, and as such, they're treated as weapons. That's pretty interesting. So I would assume that in the Iron Kingdom then, they view that the use of the icon is unnecessarily depleting the ether that's being granted to them by the deity, potentially. And maybe the depletion of these mother crystals is the trigger that brings Ifrit back. Maybe. Go check out the last video, trust me, go check out the last video, it's good. Just go watch it after this, watch this first, but then go watch it. Then we get the big question. So the Grand Duchy of Rosaria is in the country of the Phoenix, but in the trailer we see another icon show up there. Is that Ifrit? So Yoshida says that that entity is what we're calling the mysterious Dark Icon who wields power over fire, so it's Dark Ifrit. And he carries on, the rule in Valistea is that there's supposed to be one icon for each element. Phoenix for fire, Garuda for wind, Odin for darkness, etc, etc. But then we find ourselves asking why there are two icons of fire, and suddenly things fall out of balance. So yeah, definitely the existence of this Ifrit icon has completely unbalanced everything. I kind of feel like it's a symptom of the already existing unbalance. I genuinely do feel like Ifrit has come about because of the spreading blight. I don't think Ifrit's causing the blight, I think Ifrit's happened because of the blight. But yeah, plenty of speculation to be done there. Like I say, this interview is giving us quite a bit of food for thought, and I can't wait to check out the other interviews over the next few days. Definitely going to be looking at them in a bit more detail. Now we move on to the petrification of the dominants, and we find out that the risk of petrification is high for both dominants and bearers because of the way they overtax their bodies. Petrification of the body is the price that they pay for using magic without a crystal conduit. Interesting. Bearers can't turn into icons, but they succumb to petrification more and more as they use magic to carry out the forced labour they're exploited for. When the petrification progresses to a point where they can no longer use magic, they're cast aside like unwanted tools. Dominants, on the other hand, face petrification as the cost for turning into icons. It may advance rapidly or slowly, but it's an inevitable outcome regardless of the individual. Okay, so that makes me think then that the guy that we saw in the bed, in the previous trailer we saw a guy lay in the bed, kind of turned into stone. Looks like he's suffering with the Petrification. I would assume he's not a dominant. I would guess he's one of these bearers that we just get a quick glimpse of, move on. That's what it feels like to me. We just get a quick glimpse of this person, then we move on. I think that's going to be one of the bearers, because I think we've seen most of the dominants now. Unless that's one of the hidden dominants, maybe that's Leviathan's dominant, I don't know. So bearers and dominants both get petrified because they're using ether without a crystal. Which makes me think, could a dominant or a bearer use a crystal still? Or are they unable to use a mother crystal? So you know, like everyone, not everyone, but loads of people walk around with crystals so that they can use magic and so they can do mundane daily tasks using ether. Could a dominant or a bearer not use the crystal and preserve themselves? There must be a reason why not. Now the interview continues. It's one of the respects in which the beliefs of the Iron Kingdom cannot be disputed. A human using magic or turning into an icon eats away at that person's body, and those acts are therefore seen as aberrational. Yeah, the logic's reasonably solid from that perspective, I guess. And he says that he wants us to take note of why the way of the world is. So why is the world the way it is? Why are the rules what they are? That he wants us to pay attention to that. So yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on that. There's definitely going to be a lot of history and lore that you'll be able to dive into with this game. I can sense it. And Takai says here that it's kind of a balancing thing. So it's like, oh, if they're in trouble, they can just turn into an icon. But instead it takes a great deal of resolve for a dominant to become their icon. They'll only transform in extreme circumstances. Yoshida continues, it also depends on things like the individual's character and the strength and toughness that they were born with. For instance, Hugo, dominant of Titan, is the type to think, who cares, I'll just transform and wipe the floor, I'm not going to get petrified. Whereas Joshua, the dominant of Phoenix, has a weak constitution and is therefore unlikely to be compelled to turn into his icon. Then we talk briefly about the icon-on-icon battles that have to happen for the sake of the story. So we're going to see big fights, we're going to see people taking big risks. And the interviewer makes a good point here, like the setting is so grim, it's hard to get a full picture of who is actually an enemy and who is an ally. And yeah, they kind of agree, like you can't really determine who is your enemy just from the trailer. At best we can see Sylvester, who is assumedly the Emperor of the Holy Empire of Sanbreque, only says evil things, essentially. But then Yoshida finishes this section off with, but if anything, I trust that people will see the way the world is being warped, and the way that is the thing that poses the biggest threat. And yeah, 100%. We're going to have these political machinations that go on throughout the game. We're going to have the power struggle between nations, obviously. But the true threat and the true issue is going to be what's going on with the blight, what's going on with the crystals, and what's going on with Dark Ifrit. That's going to be the main thing. Now after this we do tend to stray into battle mechanics and things like that, which I will probably do a separate video for. I'll probably keep the story separate from the battle mechanics, and what I'll do is I'll take all of the mechanics information that we get from each of the interviews, because it's going to be the same no matter what, and kind of compile that into a mechanics video or something to that effect. But we do get a little bit, we do get a little teensy bit. Now, I've had to grab these from the website because I don't think Turquoise Hammer's reached this point yet as well, which works for me because, like I say, we're only going to do the story in this video predominantly. But the first kind of point of note that I just want to quickly grab, there's only a couple of them, is that we see Clive versus humans and we see Clive versus summons, and what's kind of going to be the difference? Well, you know, how's the combat going to work between each situation, I feel is the question. And Takai answers that during battle, the player basically controls Clive and fights humanoid enemies and human-sized monsters in various places regardless of location. And then the bosses, to put it bluntly, range from 1 or 2 times larger than Clive to quite large ones. But even in such boss battles, the player can perform all of Clive's operations, meaning skills, abilities, things like that. So basically saying that we're not going to see massively quick time event-filled battles, it's going to be actual combat. And they go on to say that we get to build Clive as a character and kind of set him up as we want. And this is something that they touch on slightly later on again as well. But interesting that we don't hear any mention of a party in combat. You control Clive in battles. I don't want to say I told you so, but you know. But anyway, enough of me being salty about that. The next thing that's slightly interesting, and the last thing that we're going to look at in the interview, is kind of how these icon equip abilities work. So Yoshida goes on to talk about there are 4 types of abilities for each summon beast, which we've identified kind of already from the trailer. and only 2 of them can be set when the summon beast is equipped. So you'll have to, you'll have to make some choices. So for example, when Clive equips Phoenix, it's 2 of the 4 types of abilities that the Phoenix has. You can also strengthen your abilities, and you can strengthen only the ones that you like, or even strengthen all 4 of them. So there's a lot of customizability in like what kind of loadout you've got depending on what icon that you're using. He says that up to 3 summons can be equipped at the same time, and 2 abilities can be selected for each. So yeah, pretty much exactly what we were thinking from the trailer that we saw earlier, whereas you're able to equip the abilities of these icons, essentially. And this kind of leans into my belief that Ifrit is all about absorbing and consuming, and maybe not consuming, reuniting the icons, but in different methods. So like Dark Ifrit, I assume, is just trying to consume the other icons and take their powers. Whereas Clive, I think it's more of a bond thing, and if he develops a bond with that person, he can then use their abilities. Similar to the way that he seems to be able to use Phoenix's abilities extremely early in the game because he's got that brotherly bond with Joshua. That's what it feels like to me. We're gonna dive into these interviews a bit more, but I am conscious of this video getting huge. I've got a lot of videos that I'm working on this weekend as well. I've got another Final Fantasy XVI video discussing the Iron Kingdom and Ifrit, which I'm working on, and I need to finish off the God of War predictions. Or it's not even a predictions video, it's like 10 questions that I would like answers to from God of War Ragnarok, and a little bit of speculation in there, because, it's like my one and done God of War video, this, so I'm just going to throw it out there. So they're all going to be coming in the next couple of days, so I don't want to spend a monstrous amount of time on this. We've already been going for like 30 minutes on the recording. But yeah, mega interesting interview. Like the story details that we've got, I'm going to spend a little bit more time going through the other interviews as well, and see if there's any additional information, any additional hints that we get narrative-wise in the other interviews as translations become more available. But yeah, massive thank you to Turquoise Hammer over on Twitter for doing these translations. It is a godsend, so massively appreciate that. Go give Turquoise Hammer some love. Let me know what you think about these interviews, any of the little revelations that have come out. I know it's not a monstrous amount of new shiny information, but it kind of confirms a few things that we were thinking, and they say a couple of things that also suggest that some of the speculation that we've put out there is correct. So the whole Iron Kingdom thing, the fact that they speak a completely different language, they worship the crystals as the deities themselves and things like that, it definitely kind of leans into my belief that they remember how things were 1500 years ago and why things had to be a specific way after whatever happened 1500 years ago. And everyone else has forgot, but the Iron Kingdom have maintained that position of no, we don't use the ether, we don't drain the crystals, we kill any dominants that get born because we're watching out for this Ifrit thing coming back and we don't want that. That kind of feels like the vibe for me with the Iron Kingdom. Let me know what you think. Go check out the previous video that I did where I discussed the mural, we go into detail on each icon, and then we speculate pretty wildly about things going down. So yeah, check that one out. Don't forget, hit like on this video, subscribe for future content, let me know what you think in the comments below, but more importantly than anything, have a great day.